Good evening. I'm Orly Lewis, CEO of the Weinstein JCC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to the JCC 2021 Forum. There are about over 40 households in the Zoom this evening, and we are so glad that you joined us. Since we had to modify our program this year, here's just a few general housekeeping. Given the nature of Zoom, we ask that you remain muted during the program. We've heard a few noises, so please make sure you're muted and mute yourself during the entire evening. And also please the chat box at the bottom right to add questions and comments. In 1993, the JCC Forum was launched with our first speaker, comedian Rita Rudner. Since then, this popular program has hosted some of the best and brightest minds of our time, including politicians and social activists such as Ed Koch, Mario Cuomo, Leah Rabin, Cory Booker, Elie Wiesel and his son Elisha, authors such as Cokie Roberts, Jennifer Weiner, David Gregory, and Mitch Albom, and entertainers such as Dr. Ruth, Kirk Douglas, and Joan Rivers. 28 years of excellence and impact can only be achieved with a deep commitment and passionate support. So I would like to take a moment to thank our partners, friends, and presenting sponsor, McGuire Woods and McGuire Woods Consulting. Thank you for supporting the JCC for over 10 years, in good times and in challenging times. On behalf of our board of directors, staff, and community, I would like to extend an immense appreciation and gratitude to all of our Arts and Ideas sponsors and subscribers for your continued support. To call this year difficult would be an understatement. Thankfully, you have risen to the occasion. So thank you for your commitment to elevating our community's discourse through influential, renowned speakers. Tonight would have not been possible without our wonderful staff and volunteer. Without their determination and flexibility as we navigate, including our Arts and Idea Committee, chaired by Robert Jackson, who, by the way, started the JCC Forum 28 years ago. And our key staff, Leslie McGuigan, who is now has become our Zoom expert, and Lisa Looney, who invented JCC Prime, a hand delivery service to all of our sponsors. We will all emerge from this very strange year strong, yes, maybe a little tired, but energized to continue to offer our community engaging programming to benefit the hearts and the mind, both virtually and in person. So look out for our 21-22 season coming out soon. I am so excited this evening to introduce the guests and authors of the book, The Tale of the Tea, B.K. Fulton and Johnathan Blank. I would like to invite longtime friends and supporters of the center, Susie and Ronnie Adolf, to introduce them. Thank you and have a great evening.
Good evening, everyone. B.K. Fulton and Johnathan Blank did not know each other prior to June 14th, 2020. Then, after a series of emails and acts of kindness, the two men, one African-American and one Jewish, began a chain of emails and interactions that have resulted in an extraordinary friendship. The Tale of the Tea is about how truth and honest conversation allows ordinary people to become the change they seek. The two men now carry a memento, a golf tee, to symbolize their bond and the work they must continue to do to advance civil society. The Tale of the Tea teaches us that small acts can have lasting ripple effects.
we have the honor of introducing tonight's featured guests, co-authors B.K. Fulton and Johnathan Blank, who will be joined in conversation by our program monitor, Michael Siegner. Michael Siegner served as the mayor of Charlottesville, Virginia from 2016 to 2018 during the Unite the Right rally of 2017. Afterward, he founded and chaired Communities Overcoming Extremism, the After Charlottesville Project, a bipartisan coalition including the Anti-Defamation League, the Ford Foundation, the Charles Koch Institute, the Fetzer Institute and New America, National Public Radio featuring Mike's work, sharing painful lessons from the fight against hate. Mike is partner, VP, and General Counsel of the country's largest independent digital design agency. He is the author of 3 books, including his newest, released in 2021, High Havoc, Charlottesville and American Democracy Under Siege. He has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, and Time, and has been interviewed on Meet the Press, Face the Nation, The Rachel Maddow Show, and NBR. Mike is a recipient of the Levinson Family Defender of Democracy Award from the Anti-Defamation League and the Courage in Political Leadership Award from the American Society for Yad Vashem. Forward magazine has named him one of 50's most influential Jewish leaders in America. He lives in Charlottesville with his wife and their twin boys. Susan.
Sorry. Johnathan Blank is a partner and department chair for the Business and Securities Litigation Department at McGuire Woods. He is the former office managing partner of the firm's Charlottesville office. He has been reported in cases in the Virginia Supreme Court, the 4th District Court of Appeals, and U.S. Supreme Court. Johnathan has also served as the president of the statewide Legal Aid Justice Center and serves as the co-lead pro bono attorney in the case to rid Virginia of the automatic suspension of license for failure to pay court debts and cost the nation's seminal human trafficking case. Johnathan attended University of Virginia, both undergraduate and law school, at which time he was honored as a member of the Raven and IMP societies. Johnathan is a leader in the community, and in 2017, he was the winner of the coveted Man of the Year Award for raising thousands of dollars for the Richmond Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. A native of Richmond, many of you know John, his parents, Irv and Rona Blank, and his sister, Lisa Looney. He lives in Charlottesville with his wife and 2 sets of twins, girls 14 and 14, and 2 girls 10 and 10. B.K. Fulton is the founding chairman and CEO of Solidify Productions, a feature film and media investment company designed to promote a more inclusive narrative in contemporary media. Solidify is the first independent film company to produce 4 feature films in their first year of business: River Runs Red, Atone, One Angry Black Man, and Love.com, The Social Experiment. BK is also an award-winning author of 9 books, including the popular Mr. Business, The Adventures of Little BK, children's book series, The Tale of the Tea, Shauna, and founder of Soul Vision Magazine and Soul Vision TV. Prior to becoming a full-time author and media entrepreneur, BK was vice president of the Mid-Atlantic region Virginia, Maryland, DC, and Delaware for Verizon Communications Incorporated, and president of Verizon Virginia and West Virginia. He has also held senior leadership media, technology, and policy development posts in the U.S. Department of Commerce, AOL, Time Warner, and the National Urban League. BK is a Computer World Smithsonian Laureate Medal recipient, and his thought-leading papers on technology and computer building are permanently archived in the Smithsonian Institute. He holds a bachelor's degree from Virginia Tech, a master's of science degree, and Sloan Fellowship from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and the New School's Milano School of Management and Policy Analysis, and is a Juris Doctorate from New York Law School. Phew! And without further ado, please welcome Mike Signer.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for having me and for putting together this really incredible event. And I'm really looking forward to doing it. It's an honor to be with you all and to talk about BK and John's book. I know I get the acronyms. Okay. When you read the book, you'll see the acronyms actually become very meaningful for their names. I was asked to talk at the beginning just a little bit about my experience in Charlottesville and the city's experience as it relates to the topics of the book. So I will do that, but I'd like to quickly get to the book and the story of these two gentlemen and how what they've given us. So anybody who's followed the events in Charlottesville, either closely or from afar the last few years, knows that it was a very difficult time for the city when it came to issues that the whole country is dealing with in some ways. There was, in 2016, the issue of a Confederate statue that was put in place during the Jim Crow era right near the downtown mall in Charlottesville that some folks in the city called for its removal. There was a whole process that revealed a lot of division and contestation in a whole lot of different ways. The Black community was divided in many ways about the city, as was the white community, as were different generations. And when the city council made a decision that they wanted to auction the statue to make things worse, there was a lawsuit very quickly brought under a state law which prevented cities from removing or disturbing war memorials. So even that decision, after a year of turmoil that was raised by the statue, was kind of stopped. And you had a very fraught, taut situation in the city that lasted for a long time. Meanwhile, the city was under this kind of magnifying glass for national attention from extremists and from especially white nationalists who wanted to make Charlottesville kind of this stage for some antics that followed. So we had 3 white nationalist invasions of the city that followed all of those events. They in turn brought up very intense conflicts between freedom of speech and public safety and our First Amendment law. Very, very angry, intense public meetings. Then the Unite the Right rally, there was a visit by the Ku Klux Klan in July of 2017, and then the very famous Unite the Right rally happened, which included almost a dozen very far-right militias, paramilitary organizations that came bearing overt racist and anti-Semitic symbols and insignia. They were very violent. There was a car attack after the rally was disbanded that killed the activist Heather Heyer and injured dozens more. And it was a really traumatic time for the city. And my experience as the city's mayor during a lot of this was not only trying to solve some actual problems that were coming up, like how do you handle the First Amendment, which is very difficult for local cities when you have hate events happening, because hate speech is kind of required to be hosted unless it includes a planned unlawful act that is very specific. But it was how do you address a time when people are so angry and when there's such fear and resentment and when your basic functions of government are so inflamed. And we have just been emerging from a time of incredible inflamed public meetings about virtually everything that culminated, I think, in one of the most traumatic acts that we've had as a country, which was the January 6th insurrection, which Charlottesville was a preview of in some ways. So I came to this book with this somewhat traumatic experience of having been an elected official. My trauma pales in comparison to anybody who was actually attacked or had to bear the direct brunt of these awful people in the street. But it was very difficult witnessing how inflamed the situation was in so many ways and how difficult it was to resolve. And I would say, as the mayor of the city, one of the things that I would do if I had to do it over again is I would listen more and talk less. There were some meetings when I really felt it was my duty, for instance, to explain how strict the First Amendment tests were, when people were like, how can you possibly be having the Ku Klux Klan here? And even if the rules were what they were, there were times when we should have just opened it up and let people talk for as long as they needed to talk. And there were some acts of bridging that I think were available to us that in retrospect, I think would have been healthier to have more of. And that was one of the things that I took from this book. I did a book talk recently for the book Cry Havoc that was mentioned in Richmond, and there was a group of protesters who came to the talk from the far left, as it happened, and they were very upset about some of the things that had happened in the city. And I sort of said, they were kind of prepared to protest and stop the talk. And I said, well, let's not make this be a book talk anymore. Let's just sit and talk. And I sort of took off my jacket, moved the podium away, sat down, rolled up my shirt sleeves, and it became a very painful, hard conversation where, for the first time, because things were so fractious in the city, it was an opportunity to just kind of hear and to answer some of their questions. And it became a very open, I thought, constructive dialogue in the place of a book talk. And that to me was a powerful illustration of what I took from this book was the breakthroughs that are available if we kind of get away from policy and big, systemic ideas about what laws do we pass or statutes. That's obviously very important for everybody who cares about what government and what we can all do at this time of so much injury and so much fear and anxiety. But this story of these two men, these two people at an adult stage of their life, finding something new from each other, really spoke to me. And I just wanted to close. We did the project that I started with a bunch of these groups called Communities Overcoming Extremism. The final thing that we did was a national summit last November on depolarization. It was after the election. And we had experts from all around the country who had done post-conflict work. And we're talking about how countries get back on their feet after things like civil wars. And it was astonishing how much of their lessons ended up being about the power of individual work. So even if you have some big, civil society group or a nonprofit or whatever, government's trying to help a society rebuild, a lot of the work is individual. And they talked a lot about that it's building individual trust, relationships, that's how you depolarize. And so I really think that there are broader lessons in this book. And so with that intro, I wanted to turn to both BK and JB and ask them to take a couple minutes each and talk about the story and what motivated you to undertake writing a book about it. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not kind of the most obvious thing to do. But BK, I thought I would start with you. Can you just talk about the story and what motivated you to do this project?
Sure, I appreciate that, Mike, and Susan and Ronnie, thanks for the introduction. JB, good to see you, brother. This was fun. I had no idea all of this would happen, so I'm so humbled and thankful that you decided to do this and honor us with an opportunity to talk about this project that's become kind of, the fodder for a brotherhood. But bottom line is we were all disturbed by what happened after the George Floyd murder. And in many ways, we were dealing with it, how human beings deal with things that are difficult. And we saw young people of all stripes out in the streets. We saw my wife and one of her law partners and JB's law partners decided to clean a sign that had been vandalized. And that got picked up by the paper, and Johnathan saw it and wrote a nice note to my wife. Now, we were kind of trying to pull away and take a little downtime. I think we were in South Carolina. And she said, well, that's what I do. You know, Oliver Hill was a friend of the family, and I didn't want to see his sign defaced. But if you think that's good, you should look at all this stuff my husband's doing since he retired from running the phone company. And so then I got copied on the notes, and JB and I started this kind of back and forth. And then we keep odd hours, and I'm not sure why we're kindred in that way, but I felt like this man was being genuine with me, and he was willing to challenge some presuppositions that were long held for different reasons. And I was like, wow, this is like really good as I read some of the notes. And I asked him, I said, hey, if my publisher will publish it, would you mind if I capture these and we do a book together? And he was like, didn't hesitate. I'm all in, let's do it. Do you think it'll help somebody? Well, we'll see. And the project started. And what you have is raw, it's authentic. But as you kind of summarize, we got to a place without some big committee. We got to a place where we kind of felt like we understood each other, wanted to spend time with each other's families, wanted to break bread together. And I mean, it was just a blessing when we got the COVID shots, because now we're probably going to be off the chain with the visits. We've looped Lisa into it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to doing things you love with people that you don't usually do it with. And we have to get out of our silos, and we have to fill in our stereotypes or misunderstandings about the other with facts, with truth, with things that are discoverable if we get out of our comfort zones.
That's great. Johnathan?
Sure. It's always tough to follow BK because he's extraordinary, as you all have already seen, but we'll see much more over the course of the evening. First of all, I want to thank everybody that joined us and for being asked to be part of the JCC Forum. It's, even though I live in Charlottesville, it's like coming home. And it's wonderful to see all the names of people that have meant a lot to me and influenced me over the course of my life, from young to old. And the book itself, I give, I get to share the title, but BK did 95% of the work. But the 5% is important. And I think it is part of the lesson of the book, which is you have to be vulnerable and you have to put yourself out there. And you have to be willing to explore. And that was really my ingredient to this. BK did most of everything else, and I get to have the fun of the ride. But more importantly, I get to have the fun of the relationship. But just the reaching out. He talked about the email to Jackie, and again, she did such a wonderful selfless act, and I wanted to reach out. That was the first part of it. But then, she sent me that email. And how many times do you get an email where somebody sends a recommendation of a book or a speech, and yeah, thank you, but you don't go and you don't look at it, or you don't access it. And here she sent this link to BK had just given the speech at VCU to the graduating class. And again, I had tons of stuff going on. The girls were going crazy, but I stopped and I listened to that speech, and that speech really resonated with me and made me stop and think about the things that I don't know, the things I take for granted, the things that I don't take for granted, things that I had never even heard about. And so I could have just left it there, but no, I was vulnerable and I reached out to BK. Again, we do keep very odd hours, so we'll text and email really strange times of night. But that course of going that 5% extra step, the connection has given back, infinite exponential reward to me with this book, more importantly, with the relationship with BK that's been fostered from it. But it's been an eye-opening experience about the things that I didn't know. Again, I think of myself as very educated. I try to think of myself as being open-minded on many issues. Some people say that I'm progressive left. Some people say I'm left of center, but I at least try to be open-minded. But there were things in that speech that BK gave to VCU that blew my mind, and hopefully we'll share some of it with you. And so when I reached back out to him, again, he felt that energy, felt that connection, that I was genuine. I wanted to learn. And then we just sort of opened ourselves up. And so that just 5%, that little extra percent of opening yourself up to anybody, it doesn't have to be the former president or this incredible media mogul. It could be the person, that you work with, or somebody that you just met, or somebody that's been in your office for years. Take that extra minute to listen to what they have to offer, because it can change your life. Change my life. This changed my life.
I want to push a little bit on this really powerful idea that both of you guys were vulnerable in some way, or there's something going on that made you interested and open to a connection that might not have happened otherwise. And it's more than just, obviously having, and I'm asking this because I think a lot of us are interested, is what goes on to allow bridging to happen. And that's a very personal thing. And I was wondering, BK, if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure, I'd love to attempt, and thank you for recognizing the challenge in getting out of a comfort zone, being the catalyst for a bridge. So I'm gonna get into it, and if I'm talking too much, just tell me, because I'll get going.
That's my job. I got to be the bad guy, right? So,
but the African American and Jewish community, have the shared legacy of overcoming obstacles, bondage, subterfuge, and emerging as these champions of justice and humanity. I mean, some may not know that it was the African American and Jewish community that started the NAACP, that started the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that collaborated to start the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the only organization really run by Martin Luther King. That 30 to 50% of the freedom riders during the Civil Rights era were Jewish, of Jewish descent. And so there's this history that of collaboration and working together to advance civil society. And, we're here in 2020. We saw this thing on TV that touched a raw nerve for many of us. And as I was reading the emails that Johnathan and I were sharing, I was like, it's calming me, and it might help others. It might shed some light on what any of us could do to make our society better. Our children deserve it. There's a lot of divisive speech going on. You saw campaigns, Black Lives Matter, This Lives Matters. And at the end of the day, it felt like folk were just, not really talking to each other, but we all saw this thing. And so people were responding with their humanity, which is needed. And, if we look today, you see, even in the entertainment world where I find myself now, the Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance has formed, and they're doing things. In the book, we talk about how Einstein would go and teach at some historically Black colleges and universities. And I have a picture of Einstein on my wall here in the office, teaching a group of young men at Lincoln University. And I always wondered why. And when I got into the research of it, it was really remarkable. So during World War II, German Jews were trying to get into the US, and they were applying, and there was a policy called the public charge policy. And the public charge policy said that you had to prove that you wouldn't be a burden on the nation before you'd be let in. And so a lot of them weren't let in. It was a virtual death sentence. But it was the historically Black colleges, not the government, not the more prestigious universities that were letting these German Jews in to teach on campus. And it was saving their families. Well, it turns out that Einstein knew about this history. He was a German Jew. And he didn't always accept invites to go to do guest lectures, but he tended to always accept them at this particular school. And so one of the people in the class was Julian Bond, who went on to be like the chairman of the NAACP. And there are these examples that we can identify that try to teach us how to move civil society forward. It doesn't happen automatically. It's the good people that have to get together to make it happen. I was pleased recently when I saw where some of the Holocaust survivors have this new program called It Started With Words. And what they're trying to teach us still is that it was hate and silence that led to murder. And so again, if you want a civil society, you don't sit back and wait for it to happen. You have to lean in. You have to take that extra 5% JB talked about. You have to have forums like this and good people like this who believe in humanity. I'll close with this. What the interaction with Johnathan did for me is it put salve on a wound and it gave me hope. And I never want to lose hope.
Johnathan, yeah, I'd like to turn over to you. And I just, the idea of, that's what I was looking for in that answer, was understanding, and that idea of calming and a solve, that's what you were getting from even that beginning interaction. I would encourage everybody who reads the book to, I mean, when you do read it, you know, it's evident that you guys are establishing something very real and interpersonal from the very beginning. And John, you talked a little bit about being, you know, having had an illness before, and there were other things going on with you when this lightning bolt struck. And I wonder if you could talk about your story with it.
Yeah, so I'll be glad to. In going back to what was the connection. So George Floyd obviously was a traumatic event for many people, mostly African American community. But for me, the struggle started even before then. You know, why we elected this guy who actually had supported Governor Northam, who had the blackface scandal, and then the Attorney General had the same scandal, and we had people dying, African Americans, and then we have George Floyd, and then people are defacing a monument, Oliver Hill, and I was struggling. I mean, I really was struggling with why. I mean, why is this continuing to happen? What can I do? And I still struggle with that. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that. Of like, what is there anything that I can do? Are we doomed? Are we hopeless? Back to BK's story about hope. And so it was culminating again at the beginning of COVID. I had just gone through this traumatic experience where I had pulmonary embolisms while I was about to get on a flight and almost died. And I was struggling with all these things, also with, you know, mortality, humanity, you know, the natural things when something catastrophic happens or you avoid. And so the back to BK's speech, this idea that there are all these people in the margins, we don't talk about them, we don't know that they're there. Many of them are secondary to somebody who isn't on the margins, who is white or in the mainstream, who got a bunch of credit. And we don't talk about that. And then as I was having these conversations with BK, some of them by the emails that are captured, some of them by phone, he started, I'm not even sure intentionally, but this sort of idea that, you know, if we were teaching the truth, maybe people wouldn't have this sort of instinctive reaction of not understanding how other people act or how other people think, or that there are different ways, different thoughts, or that you can just give the person the benefit of the doubt that you actually may not have different thoughts, different ways. You may be connected in a way that you would have no idea, but for the fact that you have no opportunity to explore it because it's not taught. And so as I watched the speech, and then I started thinking about it, and then we had these conversations, and then just the sort of the serendipity of the tea, because I was into golf, I'm still into golf. This idea that maybe the conversations, if you reach out and you're listening and you're being exposed to something completely different, maybe those words, those teachings are a path for us, maybe not this generation, maybe so, but really the next generation and the next generation, if we can start the conversation and we can open up to the things that BK were teaching, back to the 95%, the book really, again, I give it back to his thesis of looking to explore and understand the truths of the people on the margins. Maybe it does have an effect so that we don't have, you know, July and August in Charlottesville. Maybe we don't have the George Floyds that have continued. I mean, think of all the horrible events even after George Floyd. So now I'm talking too much, but going back to that, what was I looking for? And I was looking for an answer to why Charlottesville? Why the hell did they come there? Why were these people, for the people that weren't in Charlottesville, you know, the temple that was across from my office, CBI, where the Ku Klux Klan came and, you know, Heil Hitler to the people that were coming in and out of the congregation. You know, why the hell is this happening? And what can I do? Is there anything? And I was hopeless. And BK gave me back to the hope. Man, if I as educated as I think I am, I got a lot more education and a lot more educating myself to do. So anyway, long-winded, but that really, it was life-changing.
Well, let me shift to a related question, and I want to reserve some time at the end for some questions from the audience. But very powerfully out of this book comes the power not only of an individual connection between two people who could be friends, who have something to learn from each other, but stories that we might not know from history. The tea, obviously, and for anybody who doesn't know, the story is that it was invented by a Black inventor in America, and that it's one of these scores of stories that are revealing and revelatory and kind of, you know, very altering when you learn them. And I, you know, it strikes me that both of you are in the business of telling stories in different ways. When you win a court case and you have a recorded case, there's some storytelling that's gone into the litigation. When you were obviously making movies, those are stories. And I'm just curious if you could maybe wrap up with some thoughts about that lesson that comes from here, which is the power of, you know, we're such a, there's so much swirl. We call that at my job, which is a tech company making apps and stuff. And we call swirl what happens at work when you kind of get sucked into some, like a scrum on some work thing, you need to get out of it. And there's a lot of swirl today. And it's hard we're just preoccupied with what's on our phones and dealing with the everyday. And it's hard to dredge up on a very important lesson from even the very recent past. And it's hard to remember history. And it's like, we're just kind of caught in the slipstream, it seems to me a lot. And that to me is one of the most powerful things that came out of this book. And obviously, Johnathan, for you, just watching the keynote. So could you talk a little bit about, recent history stories we don't know, how we get more of them out there?
Let me share something. So here's the tea that we had made. I don't know if everybody can see it, but we carry it. He's got his in the little custom case we had built. Inside the clear portion is swirl. Is smoke because we can't predict everything. But yeah, Dr. George Grant invented the golf tee in 1899. In fact, the patent is behind JB over his shoulder there. And he also was the first African-American professor at Harvard and a dentist. But let's do a quick walk through history in the interest of time. I want to leave opportunity for questions for the guests. So whenever there's these awakenings in our society, you often get three things. I don't know why it's three things, but we got to figure it out. But anyway, so by 1868, so a few years after the Civil War, we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, changing a lot of things in our country ostensibly. By 1968, so after a lot of the civil rights, you got the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act, 65, the Equal Housing Act. And then after this most recent uprising, which was arguably the largest ever, 20 plus million people by some counts, and also global, we got a president that has more empathy than the person before. We maintained the House and won the Senate. And now check this out. A Black guy and a Jewish guy in Georgia flipped the Senate. Who would have guessed that? Additionally, and let it not be lost by anybody on this forum, that just a few decades earlier in the Deep South, it was two Jewish guys and a Black guy who were murdered trying to help people to vote. And so if you think your engagement doesn't matter, it matters tremendously. It is critically important. And so the hope that I was talking about, when we have wins, when we get the leaders of our society more aligned with the values of civil society and humanity, the better it is for us, for future generations. The cure for Alzheimer's, the cure for ALS, the cure for cancer, who knows where that is coming from? But I guarantee you, if we invest in more communities, invest in people on the margins, get out of our silos and see humanity in more people in more places, then we will accelerate the cures for cancer, the cures for ALS, the cures for Alzheimer's. If COVID-19 is anything, it is a clear exemplar that whether you're rich or poor, Jewish, African-American, whatever persuasion, Jew, Gentile, whatever, you get it, you could die. And it didn't discriminate. It affected some communities a little harder, according to the scientists, because of a number of reasons, pre-existing conditions and the like. But at the end of the day, we all need to go out and get that vaccination. I hope you've got yours. I've got mine. I know JB's got his. Because I want you all around, because you represent the good people. You represent the people that give love a chance. Someone asked me one time to try to define divine serendipity. And so in my best BK voice, I said that divine serendipity happens when God puts us in proximity with the people we need to meet or work with to give love a chance. When we do this work, we give love a chance.
Johnathan?
It's hard to follow again. I'm going to go back to the T and Dr. George Grant. I do carry mine in. My sister is will call me out that I'm afraid that I'm going to lose it or destroy it. I walk around with a wallet with a bunch of T's in it just so I remember and so I have it every single day, and I have since the day that I said I'm going to carry my T. Dr. Grant's story to me, again, there's so many in the book. If you read the book, BK gives a lot more examples that are just extraordinary, from the filament to different things there, lots of really neat. But for Grant, again, I love to play golf. I like to watch golf. I love all sports, but golf right now is something that I've been into. And I was just blown away by this story about the T. You think about probably the most white privileged sport, period. you think about the amount, I mean, every week it's on television. Every other sport sort of takes a break. This is on 52 weeks out of the year. We've had one major figure that of color in terms of Tiger Woods. We've had others that, again, now are starting to get some recognition, but for the most part, this is 99.9% a white sport. And yet every single time someone plays golf, they have to thank an African-American who invented the tee. And yet nobody knows about Dr. George Grant. No one knows this guy. It's mine. I mean, I was blown away when BK put this it was actually another article, and I went and I researched it, and I was like, no way. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me. It's never talked about in any of the telecasts. None of the players know about it. I mean, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of industry around this tee, invented by the son of a slave, and again, African-American. And it goes back to what BK said. Again, if more money and more time and resources and mentorship were given to people on the margins, we would exponentially increase our opportunities for more tees. And the tee is silly because it's golf. Cancer is not silly. It's real. And if we can invest in more people, maybe we'll get cures. And so again, to BK's story and his thesis, people should be reaching out to 5% without any expectation that you're going to get anything back from that 5%. It's unconditional. And maybe you're lucky like me and you get exponentially rewarded. Maybe you don't. But my thesis is that the more that we reach out and explore these areas, the better off that we're going to be as society.
Fantastic. So before we get to a couple questions, I'm going to do a moderator's privilege here and say some of these names because it just was so profound reading your book. In 1891, Philip Downing invents the mailbox or the street letter box. In 1940s, Frederick McKinley Jones invents the refrigerated chucks. Garrett Morgan in 1983, after a terrible carriage accident, invents the signal traffic light. Marie Van Britten Brown, all African-American, invents the home security system in 1969 in response to high incidence of crime, which later led to the ringing doorbell. Alice Parker, the natural heating furnace in 1919. 1970, Shirley Ann Jackson, the first Black woman to receive a PhD from MIT, leads the team that develops the touchtone phone, caller ID, and call waiting. Gladys West invented GPS and then was inducted into the Space and Missile Pioneers Hall of Fame in 2018 by the Air Force. Mary Sherman Morgan, AKA the Rocket Girl from South Dakota, helped create literally rocket fuel. And then Miss Katherine Johnson invents, was a NASA mathematician who calculated complex orbital trajectories, and she was in Hidden Figures. So a lot of people have seen Hidden Figures, are familiar with this idea that there is a hidden history, but they may not go farther than that, than watching that one movie. And there's a lot there. It's an extraordinary list. Grace Hopper invented COBOL, the computer language, and then Lewis Howard Latimer invented the carbon filament in the light bulb, which Johnathan mentioned. So I would, I know that, I was changed just by reading this and knowing this history. So I'm going to commend everybody to get your copy and share this. And I hope, let me get to a question, but I wanted to plant a seed here.
Mike, can I jump in on that? Just
sure.
I actually just joined his family house foundation board because we're trying to preserve the house and things like that. But Lewis Latimer, they were from Virginia, and his parents were enslaved, and they escaped north to give him a chance. He's not formally educated, so he used to watch draftsmen, and became this really talented draftsperson, and invented the carbon filament. which allows the light bulb that we have today to burn. The Thomas Edison bulb used paper filaments and they burned out too quickly. He also worked for Alexander Graham Bell and wrote and did the patent drawings for the telephone. So the same guy. And so this is, so just to let it sink in, somebody who was not supposed to learn to read created the very instrumentality that allows everyone in the world to read more clearly to this day. And we know almost nothing about it. We have to do better.
All right, well, amen. So if anybody could send in questions, you can send them directly to Lisa if you don't want the whole group to think. I think you can also post a question on chat if you'd like to. I want to, before I get to one of them that I have in my inbox here, I want to close with just planting a seed, which is maybe there's a movie here. Maybe there's an interesting, I feel like we need to end it with some kind of, so we need to do something very dramatic in this call. So maybe I need to, we need to have some, but I just want to plant that seed. Maybe there's I read the book and I was like, yeah, maybe there's a screenplay or a story here that could share some of these thoughts. Anyway, okay, let me, you don't have to respond to that, but here's one question, tough question. And I'm gonna ask two in a row, and then you guys can choose what should happen to the monuments that have been removed. I guess that's a question specific to Richmond. And here's another question. This is for Johnathan, but I would actually be curious to know, BK, your response to it too, which is, Johnathan, you write in the book about how what you're learning now conflicts with what you learned in high school and college. But I'd also, BK, be interested in your response to that question, which is how are current events interacting with what you knew back in your earlier years? So two questions for you both, and let's handle them however you'd like, but maybe BK, you could start.
Okay, sure. Let's see. Definitely learning things now that I didn't learn in high school or college. In fact, when I was in engineering school, I wasn't doing so well in the beginning and decided that I was going to plan my escape from Virginia Tech, and went to the library to, figure it out. And I found myself in the E185.5 section of the Dewey Decimal System. And so in any system that uses the Dewey Decimal System, that happens to be the section on Black people. And so I started reading these books. That's how I learned about Lewis Latimer, and I'd go back to class with it. There was a guy named Granville T. Woods who invented the electric third rail on the subway. So if you've ever ridden the subway in New York, the thing that powers it was invented by a Black guy named Granville T. Woods. He sold the patent to General Electric in 1901. And so what ends up happening, why are these little factoids relevant? I was an engineering student and had no idea about these engineering feats. And so when I would go back into class and share this stuff and look at this book, to my professor's credit, more often than not, they would say, oh, I never learned that either. So let me embellish the lecture. Let me add this to it. And so I was pleased when that happened, because I think, as we've kind of been talking about, it's the truth that sets us free. It's the truth that feeds a curiosity, and it may create new questions, but it's okay. I mean, what I think has resulted in, for me, in terms of going to the library, learning more, is that I'm curious about all of humanity now. I want to learn more about the Jewish community, more about Asian community, more about the Latino community. And so I reach out to friends, and I don't just do it in an email or just picking up a book. The part that was, I think, has created the emotion, or some of the emotion, was JB and I talked on the phone. We visited, we broke bread. And so I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it. I love this man. I love his family. I want the best for them. And I feel like they care for Jackie and I. When we were doing our exchanges, and then he talked about the health scare, we I felt like a pause on all this atmospherics in society. What do you mean it helps you? What's going on? You okay? You good? All right, we all right? And then we push through. What ends up happening with that level of engagement by human beings, and again, why it gave me hope, was if I can have that level of empathy with someone who was just weeks or days prior a stranger, then what would happen if more people actually did this? A lot of people, you've seen the swastika iconography, and sometimes you see the kind of the hate stuff, and they often flash the swastika signs. They do the crazy salutes, and a lot of people where is that coming from? Why is there this association? When you read and you study it, and there's a great book, it'll probably win a Pulitzer, her first book won a Pulitzer, but you read Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, what you find out is that the Nazis studied the American South to come up with the regime in Germany. They came to the United States. And then, according to the book, they dialed back some of the practices. But we know the history was horrific. And so hate is hate. And it is up to us to deal with it, to face it, to quiet it. And I think it is, but to arm ourselves appropriately, it requires this reading, taking in new information, interacting with different people, reminding ourselves that we are all cousins sharing the same rock, trying to have some sense of peace for ourselves and our families. We all want that. And what we learned after January 6th was that there are some people who think that only they should decide how we experience our joy in this country. And that just, we can't allow that.
I'll try to answer a couple of questions that you asked, and then there's one out there that asked about my handicap, and Marty Kahn, I think, is on, and he'll say that this is not true, but since I last played with him, I had 2 really good scores that screwed up my handicap in a positive way. So I'm now just around an 11, which is terrible for Evan McGrill, who's my partner and a member guest that he and I always play with. So that's a bad thing. So Marty's going to say that that's not a true handicap. But to answer your question in terms of the learning and then the statutes, and I think the question is some of the learning today, was that the question versus back then, Mike? Yeah.
Specifically, what did you learn in high school and college that conflicts with what you have learned now?
Yeah, so Cullen is on I see Cullen is dialed in. Thanks, Cullen. Cullen just wrote an amicus brief with the former Deputy Attorney General Cynthia Hudson about the statutes. And for all those in the Jewish community that want to get some knowledge about the statutes, it's an extraordinary brief, not just a legal brief, it's a historical brief about the truth of those statutes. Back to high school and college, again, we were never taught about the truths of those statutes. And the people that we were glorified on those statues, the stories would, I think, shock. They shocked me. I mean, I thought that I even had studied some of it, and then I read Cullen's brief the other night, and I was like, I couldn't believe the stories that historically that he pointed out true in his brief, which were not taught, and the opposite were taught, and we glorified people that we should not have been glorifying. That the story is so different than what was taught in the 1970s and 80s in high school, and even into the 90s in college in Virginia, about the South and the Southern tradition and the Confederacy and the Confederate generals. They were, again, it's not true. And if you dive in or push in and you give, a little bit of time to read it, I think it will give you a whole new perspective of Monument Avenue and those monuments and the people that we were glorifying. So to answer the other question, what do I think we should do with the statues? I've had a lot of answers to that question. One, I do think some of the statues should go in museums so that we never forget with this story, with the historical truths, not what was the lost cause glorification that's untruth. So I think some of them, some frankly, I think we're better off they should be destroyed. And I think the Baltimore mayor, while you were struggling with it in Charlottesville, the Baltimore mayor, she just in the middle of the night got rid of them and destroyed them. And I always thought, well, maybe that if we could have done that, and I remember that late night vote that you had to take, and I'm going to come back to you in a second. And then the other one, the city, when we couldn't get rid of them for a while, y'all had a contest. What should we do with them? And I said we should cover them with concrete so you would know you wouldn't be able to see them. And then you should design something that was fun around them. So the one in the park, I had told Susan we should concrete over it, maybe have a people so people would always remember it, but they would be buried. So we'd bury the false truths. Wouldn't get rid of them because that was what they said we couldn't do. And then we would put a jungle gym on it so people, all the kids, our twin kids, could step on them and deal with the truths. And so again, all sort of creative things. Before I let you go, maybe we have time for more questions. I do want to give a shout out to Mike. Living in Charlottesville during that time, it really was a precursor of what took place on January the 6th in terms of what took place in DC. And to think of a leader that did the things that the mayor, Mike, that you're looking at did, it really was extraordinary. I know he had certain things that he would do differently, say differently, but he was in an elected place that was a very, very difficult place to be. And I remember seeing Mike, and I didn't know what to say to him. And I don't know if you remember this, Mike, and I just reached out and I gave you a hug. I said, I don't know what to say.
Okay.
There's nothing to say.
I do remember that.
I'm just going to hug you because I don't know what else to do.
I do remember that.
And I want a public forum. I know it's mostly Richmond people, but thanking the people that are serving and standing up to say things aren't right, and we need to try to redirect it. And maybe you're going to swing and you're going to miss, but Mike was swinging, and for that, I just want to take this public forum to thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much, John. That's very kind. And I do remember that hug. All right. Let me go to a couple other great questions. What caused the rift between the Black and Jewish communities, and how do we mend it? Carol Weinstein asks, I've been pondering, even obsessed in the last months about how to make this 5% stop. Maybe it is just a hug. Let's wrap up with those two questions. Those are both great ones. And maybe both of you.
I love those questions, and I love that you guys hugged. I'm going to tease JB about that for the rest of his life. But it's a good.
Look, we're modern men. We can hug it out.
We can hug. We hug.
100%.
I hug you.
You absolutely do. You better keep doing it. And that's part of the point. I mean, this stuff can get real heavy, y'all, and don't let it. I mean, we're going to be all right. We're going to keep working hard, but we also have this responsibility to the people we love, the people that looked out for us. We owe, and so you pay it forward. I pray that all of us have the courage and the will to go for what we want most instead of simply what we want now. If we get out of our comfort zone a little bit and do something we love with someone we don't usually do it with, I think we create these moments for a hug, these opportunities to learn something new, to share something new. I mean, at the end of the day, none of us knows it all, but together we know enough to take a step forward, even a small step. And we have to keep taking those steps. What I don't want us to do is, we've made it, we get into our silo, We stop challenging our presuppositions, and then we'll end up having another one of those awakenings, and we force our children to grapple with these issues. Think about how much energy and time we put into these racial questions. I want to see, I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer. I want to see them in science. I want to build monuments. I want to build pools I never swim in. And we do that together. We do it faster together anyway. There's an African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, sometimes you have to run alone. But if you want to go far, it's critically important to run together. And that's what the Tale of the Tea is for me. And then the fact that we won a National Book Award, how crazy is that?
It's crazy. Yeah. Mike, I not much to add to that. I think there are big things that you can do, and people of means do big things, and even people of means can do smaller things. And I think you can't have a expectation that everything's going to work. You can't put the pressure on yourself that you're the savior, you're the one that's going to be the person that changes. But if you invest in just taking the step, any step, small, large, again, back to what BK said, you're doing it together with people. And when you're doing it together, whether it's the hug, I think that we have increased the chances for change. And I think that, to me, the Tale of the Tea, doing it together with BK increases the chance for change.
All right. Well, we've gone a little bit over time, but I think it was worth it. And I want to, I sent out a link a little bit earlier to everybody on the Amazon link to buy this valuable book. I'm going to send it out again right now. So if you look at your chat box there, if you're a frequent or infrequent Zoom user, you just go down. It should have just popped up if you go to chat. This book is on Amazon.com. So you just Google, or you just put A Tale of the Tea in Amazon, and you can buy it. And I would encourage you to.
It's also on Audible if people want to download the audio, and an actor is actually reading it. So if they're driving, and it's a quick read, it probably goes about an hour. But it's another way to get it.
And I would also, I'll do what these very discreet gentlemen won't, which is I will ask you to spread the word about this book and share it on your social networks. If you can put up a review on Amazon, those are worth more than gold in the publishing world. And if you can recommend it to a friend who has a business or a nonprofit or a reading group, whatever, it's tweet about it, Facebook about it. It really matters, because people, the number one way that the lessons in books get shared is by word of mouth, much more than anything else. And it's a very personal book, and maybe that's your gift, as you share the story that these two guys have yourself. So wanted to close with that thought, and to thank the JCC for the privilege of moderating this discussion, and for Johnathan's my, I'll probably see you on the street tomorrow. So we're close neighbors, literally, but BK, it's been a real honor getting to know you virtually. And I've known your wife a little bit from the legal community in Virginia, and really to read the book was great. And I wish you all the best of luck, and thank you for a great discussion.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, I just want to jump in on behalf of the JCC. I want to thank Johnathan, BK, and Mike for this wonderful conversation. I am so excited to have been a part of it, because you tackled such a big discussion on your own. And I think you've made it where we all feel comfortable to start talking about it ourselves, and hopefully moving forward. Like I said, it's been such a big, ominous topic, and I really feel like this is what we need, and gives us the permission to start having these conversations amongst ourselves and others. So thank you so much for taking the time. Everyone else out there, thank you for taking the time. We have recording this, so we will be sharing it, and I'm sure there'll be many more views. And have a good night, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Night.